Today is the day. When you have chronic illness, you dream of a future day where, first of all, that you even know what the heck is going on. Just to finally know what it even is. You just, first of all, just dream of that. And then you finally get it, hopefully, and then you can actually work on it. And hopefully it's not too bad. In some cases, it still is a journey from there. In which case, you then start to dream of the day where you could actually be better and just totally done with it and be a normal person. And you dream that one day I could be so normal that I'd make a video just to share with anybody else who needs it. It's kind of like those scenes in the movies with soldiers in the trenches, you know, please God, if you could just get me out of here, I'll do something good, you know. It's like that. And today, it's hard to believe, but it's the day. I actually made it. And so this is me paying it back. This is going to be a big video. If you have SIBO, primarily that's what this is about, which if you have IBS, you're going to learn for the most part you probably have SIBO, about 70-80% chance. Some gastritis, there's a lot of people struggling in that community. I can talk a bit about that as well. Duodenitis is also very related to it. POTS is kind of tangential because there's a lot of different reasons people get POTS, but that gets folded into this as well. What you're going to want to know right off the bat is I am completely cured. I had all of this. I'll get into every last bit of it, but I was as bad as any of you, I promise you. Just maybe some of you could beat me, but it's pretty dang bad. I got to the point, at least, where I'd say possibly my life was in danger. And now, nothing. No symptoms. I have no restrictions. I have no diet issues. I can eat gluten. I can eat lactose. I can eat acid. I have energy. I can exercise. I can sleep. I don't have nightmares every night because of pain. I am completely free. And on top of that, I don't think that any of it will come back. In fact, I'm confident that none of it will come back because I actually understand what happened now. And I understand how I fixed it. And I understand the kinds of tools that anybody in this situation would need to get out of this and make sure that they don't ever go back into it. Because this is a very crazy, elusive disease that is very, very difficult to get good information about. But funny enough, it turns out it's a very logical disease, and it's easy to understand, and it's not hard to see how you get better once you understand it. And sadly, it's not information you're gonna probably get from a doctor. Although we'll talk a lot about doctors, and we'll talk about some of the great ones, the greatest one really about this whole on this topic. I'll mention him here. If you just want to look up Dr. Mark Pimentel, for goodness sake, just look him up. You'll eventually figure enough out to be in good shape. However, if you want to hear the story from a patient's perspective and just everything that goes into this, and maybe even a bit more than you're even actually going to get from him, just because I have the perspective of having gone through all of these things, then you're going to get it here. This is going to be like a master class in GI disease right here, from the top to the bottom. So that's why you want to watch this. If you got anything to do with any of this, IBS, SIBO, whatever, stay tuned. It's probably going to be long. I'll try to divvy it up into chapters. I've got some kind of notes here. I've tried to organize my thoughts, but I'm not some pro streamer. I haven't got this all figured out. So it's going to be kind of long and slightly disorganized, but I'm going to try to get through this and get you the information that you need. And by the way, this is not going to be there's some videos out there of like, hey, I'm better, I had SIBO and I'm better. Okay, this is not going to be one of those that just ends up with them being like, oh, and then by the way, I found about the elemental diet and now I'm better and now you should do that. No. All right? No. There's a lot of information and you've got to have the information, because I'm sorry to say there's no simple just like, oh, and then you just take this and then everything's magic. Does it work for some people? Yeah. But there's reasons for it, and there's reasons it only works for some people. You're going to have all that information, and more importantly, you're going to have the information you need to figure out what fixes you. Because what fixes you might not even be exactly the same as me. However, it is going to be close enough that it's going to get you the ability to figure it out. You're going to know what things to test for yourself. Everybody's body is a little bit different, especially when you get into this GI stuff. And you're going to know enough to figure out what you should be testing yourself. And what they're going to give you, what they're going to want to give you, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's not going to just be another one of those where I just go, oh, by the way, and here's the magic fix. Okay. All right. Before we can get in anything, even, I'm going to talk a bit about, it's going to be kind of interwoven with my own story because it's kind of necessary. We got to go over some basics, because otherwise none of this is even going to really make sense or have a good reference. What is SIBO? And for that matter, what is even the small bowel? I mean, we got to have some good fundamentals here. First off, the GI, okay? You got your stomach, all right? You eat, esophagus, first stop, stomach, okay. Then, right after the stomach, right, you got the little duodenum thing, duodenum, whatever. Actually, it's on this side, right? And that's just connected to the small intestine. Small intestine is like 20-something feet right in the dead center of your abdomen, all right? Like 20 feet of this winding stuff, okay? Before it gets to the large intestine. And here's the trick. When people think GI, and this is for everybody, even doctors, even the whole field, okay? They completely gloss over the small intestine. And that is killing this whole SIBO field, okay? It's killing everything about it, because they know a lot about the stomach. They know gastroparesis, they got all kinds of different pills. They know how you can get your acid levels reduced or stuff to empty faster. They got all kinds of tools for the stomach. They can do an endoscopy, they can see it. All right, same thing for the large intestine. Okay, on the end, right? They got all kinds of tools. They can do a colonoscopy, they can go in there and check it out. In fact, if you're a certain age, you're doing this. It's required. They do it all the time. All right, they're familiar with it. They got all kinds of pills, they got Linzess, they got things that they can trigger your colon to empty. All right, they understand constipation or diarrhea, all that stuff. They're always thinking of it. They're thinking of the large intestine. The trick is no one's paying attention to the 20-something feet in the middle. That's not an easy thing that they go and check all the time. It's not an easy thing that they go look at. They have routines about. They don't really have pills dedicated to it. They don't have a lot of good tools, and we'll get into this. But fundamentally, SIBO is a disease about the small bowel. And that is why you're going to have a lot of trouble finding good help. It's because they frankly have spent a lot of time on what's upstream and downstream, and they're not paying attention to the small bowel. The small bowel is insanely important. It's literally where your body takes up all of its nutrients. It's where it essentially drinks everything from. Everything good that your body gets comes from that, right? You eat, you go in the stomach, all the stomach does is kind of pre-digest your food, right? Then it goes in the small bowel, and that's where it sucks up everything that it wants. All the vitamins, all the good things. Okay? So it's critical. Super important. right? By the time it gets to the large bowel, everything that it wants is basically sucked out of it. And then you just got all this bacteria in the large bowel that just kind of have a big party. And that's where they all, people talk about the microbiome and blah, blah, blah. That's supposed to be in the large bowel at the end, right? And that's where you mainly talk about things like, oh, I feel constipated or whatever. You're talking about stuff, you're familiar with these feelings down low, right? Your bottom of your bowels, right? But what people don't think about is you have digesting matter in the dead center of your abdomen, right here. And that is also what's stopping people from figuring out what's going on. When in the beginning for me, one of the first things I ever had was back pain, and it didn't make sense to anybody because nobody was thinking about the fact that I was swelling up in the dead center of my abdomen, right? I didn't feel constipated. I didn't have issues in my large bowel. But what I was doing was swelling up inside essentially the center of my rib cage to the point where it was pressing on everything else, right? So the small intestine, that's what it's all about. Okay. So SIBO, what's going on with SIBO? First of all, what is it? Okay, so first of all, what's going on in about, they say, Dr. Pimentel, his research shows somewhere around 80% of cases are, you just got food poisoning. People get food poisoning all the time. In fact, sometimes the food poisoning isn't even that significant. It's not like one of those crazy ones where you just are completely sick as heck for days. Sometimes you get food poisoning and you just have upset stomach for a couple of days and then you go on with your life and you don't even think twice about it. So the problem is you could have a food poisoning case, either super severe or even like not even that noticeable, and these poisonings are capable of actually damaging the kind of neuromuscular whole system of your intestines doing the whole peristalsis movement where they move things along. They call it the migrating motor complex, MMC, right? Right off the bat, I'll put a link in the description. You got to read about the MMC. That's everything. If you got SIBO, if you have IBS, probably this is what it's all about, okay? And that information is not getting out there enough. It's about your migrating motor complex, okay? And what happens is if you get poisoned, it can actually impair the function of your migrating motor complex. They see that people diagnosed with SIBO, they've done some bunch of studies, and they estimate that they do, it says somewhere on that wiki page, I think it's like they only have a third as many migrating movements as a normal person, and then even the ones they have are only like 2/3 the duration. So the point is that 20 feet of pipe right in the center of your body isn't doing that peristaltic motion enough. And so everything slows down right in the center of your body so much that eventually it is permitting an environment that bacteria are capable to survive in, because you're not really supposed to have much bacteria in the small intestine. All that biome stuff is all about the large intestine. They usually can't survive in the small intestine, partially because there's so much movement supposed to be happening in there. It actually makes it unfriendly for them. But once you've had your system injured and now your muscles aren't firing anymore, not even nearly as much as they should, it's possible for bacteria to start figuring this out, and they start migrating out of your large intestine through the ileum up into the small intestine, and they just start having a party. And in fact, they essentially prefer it there because there's more food, and it's better food because it hasn't had all the nutrients sucked out of it, right? So they essentially start a parasitic relationship with your body where they start stealing your food. So you eat, it goes in there, and they're like, oh, sweet, and they just start stealing everything. And on top of stealing everything, they also injure the villi, inside your small intestine, which is very similar to celiac disease, essentially. You're talking about, damage to those little things that all help you absorb nutrients and stuff. So not only are your nutrients being stolen, but your body's being injured so that you're no longer as capable of even absorbing the nutrients. So you start to get deficiencies. You'll get anemia. You get B12 deficiency. You'll start seeing things like the whites of your fingernails start retreating. You'll get brittleness. Your nails will start breaking. You get all this kind of malnourished stuff. That'll start to happen eventually. And even eventually POTS is part of it as well. It's a serious eventual place you can end up with this. And so anyway, that's the general process here. And something that kind of annoys me a little bit about SIBO, it's not their fault, but I don't even really like the name of it that much because it is what it is, right? You have a small intestine bacterial overgrowth, okay? But when you call it that, what everyone gets obsessed with is, well, let's kill the bacteria, right? Because the bacteria, that's in the name, that's the problem. But it's not the problem. The bacteria, that's like lesson one. The bacteria are essentially a symptom of the problem. Your problem is migrating motor complex impairment. Okay? So, but because we call it SIBO, the few people even ever manage to figure out that they even have SIBO end up getting distracted because all they want to do, step one right away, is just be obsessed with the kill phase. They want to kill everything. They want to kill the bacteria. But I've made the comment that it's almost like seeing a car broken down on the side of the road with rust growing on it, right? And you go, oh, it has rust overgrowth. And it's like, well, yeah, but don't you think what's more important is the fact that the engine doesn't work? It's not moving, Maybe if you fix that, then you wouldn't even have the rust in the first place, okay? So maybe name it something more direct to the point of what it even is so that people focus more immediately on what even is the problem, right? Because what you end up with is people get obsessed with, it's all about bacteria. So now I got to kill bacteria. But what happens? You kill the bacteria, you don't fix the MMCs, well, it just grows right back. Exponential growth. You can kill 99.9% of it. And it won't matter long term. It'll just grow right back. Because exponential growth will grow back in a relatively short period. Because if you're not focusing on fixing what's essentially a motility impairment. Okay. All right. So that's just the basics of what's even going on here, which takes quite a bit of work to even dig down to that. All right. But all right. So I'll keep coming back and adding more. But I'm going to start kind of tying it in with the history here. So I started this whole thing around 6 years ago. It's too long. If you've been sick that long, you'll understand. Hey, and by the way, I know some of y'all are going to watch this. Some of y'all had this for 20, 30 years, all right? You make my 6 years look like nothing. But 6 years, it's long enough that you can't even really remember all the chapters of what's even happened to you. Okay, I've tried. But I can tell you it was 6 years, and the reason I can tell you that is because I lived in a different house. And I know my kid was a baby. And now he's 7. And that's how much of my life was, and his life, was impacted by just dealing with this. So back then, first thing I had was significant low back pain. It would get worse at night, which now makes sense. A lot of digestion occurs at night. But first thing I thought, I was like, oh, I need to go to like a back doctor or something. Went to some back specialist dude. He took one look at me. He saw I was in my, mid-20s, and he's like, you're fine, whatever. Did some taps on my back, and he's like, everyone gets old. You just got whatever, normal aches and pains. Welcome to, getting closer to 30. It's like, all right, thanks for nothing, dude. The other thing that started was I started to notice I always had to go pee. It was like my bladder was like a walnut. It just couldn't hold anything. And now I know it's because I'm swelling so much inside the center of my body, basically pushing in all directions, that I was pressing on the bladder so much that it was kind of artificially making it small. So I was just, going to the bathroom 3-4 times a night because I could just hardly, I was like always uncomfortable, right? Always uncomfortable in lots of different ways. But essentially, when this first started, I wasted incredible amounts of money and time thinking that it was funny enough. I was blaming my bed, right? Because I'm getting back pain. I'm like, well, it's an old bed. The doctor says it's nothing, so maybe it's time to get a new bed, right? And by the way, beds are expensive. And I went through way too many of them. Way too many. Before I finally... I'm talking the store beds and the internet beds and the box beds and the special floofy beds. And I eventually made a custom bed out of pure latex from Africa. All right, I did everything before I finally was like, oh, wait, what if it's somehow me? And there's no answer to, like, there's nothing that could ever make me feel better. I slept on the floor. It was bad. And so what ended up happening was around this time I started noticing that not only did I have back pain, but I was getting pain, like a real extreme tightness in all these like pelvic type muscles. And so I ended up going to this pelvic specialist, MD. First of all, why am I getting just, from what we've talked about now, so we can have a clear thought process as looking back why this happened. Okay. If you have SIBO, you essentially have such a slowdown in your small intestine that, remember, this is where your body tries to get nutrients from, right? This is where it drinks from, right? It's supposed to be just wonderful, fresh food coming in full of nutrients. If you have SIBO, I'm going to make this real simple for you. You have human waste stuck in there, and your body's drinking it. So you're being poisoned. It's essentially like food poisoning, right? Because you're just getting it over and over and over. You've got digested matter that's been processed by bacteria like it's in the large intestine, and it's just sitting in there taking forever to get out. And it's this never-ending traffic jam of waste in an organ that's supposed to be essentially clean, right? And constantly cleaning itself with these MMC waves. And so you just have waste, and your body is just drinking it up over and over and over. Toxic waste. And it makes you sick as hell in many, many ways. I've seen a lot of weird things people can get from this. It's not even like you're gonna all be the same. You're not gonna be the same as me. People are gonna have weird stuff. Some people have tons of skin issues, which makes sense. I don't know why, but I didn't. I started getting my hair falling out. That's come back. But it's, you're being poisoned over and over. My teeth were grinding away because of the chronic stress of being poisoned over and over. Your body doesn't know what to do about it. And so you start grinding your teeth all night and all these things. But point is, why was there muscle spasms? It's just yet another thing that can happen. If you're having that waste pulled into your body over and over, you can get these crazy chronic muscle spasms. So what ended up happening was I went to this pelvic specialist, and we're going to talk about doctors. It's a big part of this whole process. I'm going to try not to just rant about it, but I would say a reasonable statement I'm going to make is I've seen quite a lot of the spectrum of doctors. And this first one was way on the end of complete garbage, just a complete quack, okay? She was an MD, she was a pelvic specialist. I go in and I say, hey, I got these, spasming muscles like in my upper legs and all this kind of stuff. It's just like really seized up. And essentially what was happening was my muscles were permanently in spasm. I can't remember the name of that anymore. It was years ago when I got treated for this, but they were permanently in spasm, and they were in spasm so hard and so long that they actually were pulling my SI joint out of place. And when you do that, it puts a crazy amount of pain in your low back. And so, but anyway, I get this lady, and she doesn't figure out any of this. She basically just is like, oh yeah, you just have chronic pelvic pain. And then she's like, we need to just sell you these shots. We're just gonna basically inject like rose herbal, like it was like rose petals and hibiscus or some junk into your groin for like $18,000 a shot. And it was all like she was not in network anywhere. It was a total screw job. It was crazy. They wouldn't even let you talk to them unless you had out of network benefits in your insurance plan. It was just craziness, and I could see right away. I was like, all right, well, this is freaking great. So I kind of managed to weave around her actually doing anything, but I got a script to a doctor of physical therapy from her, and that was the only useful thing. That was a very useful thing. I got it from her. I have a lot of respect for DPTs. They've done a lot for me, even way before this with other surgeries and stuff. So I get this DPT. She takes one look at me and listens to my story, and she goes, lay down, and she pulls my two legs, and right off the bat, my ankles don't line up. One of my legs is longer than the other. She goes, yeah, your SI joint is messed up. And she ended up working backwards with me and ended up figuring out what I was saying, which is that I had chronic muscles that would never stop firing because of a reason that was yet unknown. So then I ended up getting something called dry needling, which is as fun as it sounds, just literally sticking needles in your muscles until they spasm back, basically. It makes them stop spasming. But it would keep coming back, so I'd have to get needled over and over and over. And at this point, she's like, okay, something's wrong that's causing this. This isn't normal. And then they started noticing, like, I started mentioning gut stuff. I was like, I stopped eating lactose. I feel like it's not helping. And they started doing all this kind of like GI manipulation stuff they call visceral massage and stuff. And they were noticing, they're like, yeah, you feel like not normal in your abdomen. And something's going on food-wise or something. It might be like you're allergic to something, or we don't know what's going on, but it's something digestive. So I owe her a lot for connecting that, making those jumps. She really was the first person to make me even realize it had anything to do with anything gastric related. Which a lot of people miss that. Even in the SIBO communities and stuff, they just think like, oh, how didn't you just know right off the bat? It's like people can have all kinds of weird symptoms for a long time before they even know that it's even digestive. So anyway, around that point, I started increasing restrictions in food. My wife started noticing. She's like, you're always worse when you eat gluten. She noticed because she couldn't eat it. And so I was like, well, fine. I'll do whatever I got to do, so I can sleep through the night without being in pain. So no more gluten. That was gone. No more lactose. I started being careful about red meats. Just anything that seemed like it was inflammatory or just generally a bad idea, I started just avoiding or basically just completely canceling out. And it helped. But the problem is it didn't fix you, right? A lot of this is about you just start retreating into an increasingly constrained quality of life that's worse and worse without actually getting better. And that is an important concept, by the way. There's a lot of different ways people can experience that in attempting to cure this without understanding what it is. There's a lot of that going on. And you got to be careful of that kind of thing. That's how you end up with serious malnutrition. That's how you can end up with POTS. So you got to be careful following those rabbit holes, even though they might seem like they make you better. I mean, some of these things the doctors will even tell you to do them, and they already know they're gonna make you sick after 3 months, but they tell you to do it, like low FODMAP and stuff, just because it makes you shut up because you say you feel better. But it's not a solution, and you got to be careful with those things long term. But anyway, so I started getting really more noticeable swelling in my abdomen. I had to get something called a ratchet belt, which is just like, like the belt you use for pants for work or whatever. They have like special ratchet ones because I was literally they're like really easy to like manipulate on the fly. It's not like you have to totally take the belt apart and do the thing. It's like they're real easy to just like constantly move in and out. I would have to wear pants. I would have pants, like I would own pants that were like 4 different sizes, like everything from like 32 to like 36, and I would just constantly be like, I don't even know. I would just kind of give up and just wear like 36, with just using the ratchet belt is the only reason it would even stay on for part of the day, and then the other part of the day it's too tight. Just huge like variations, and it was because of these bacteria. They are feasting on your food, and they just produce incredible amounts of off gas, and it just swells you up from the dead center of your body, and you're not thinking, like, it doesn't feel like some of these things people think of when they talk about GI issues, and that's why we're not recognizing it. We're not used to the idea of like being swollen up like a balloon right in the middle of your abdomen. You're not even noticing that. It's hard to understand that. It doesn't have a sensation that you recognize. In fact, I don't even know if the small bowel has many even nerves in it, right? So if you get backed up in the large intestine, the colon, you know what that feels like. It has a feel to it. It's uncomfortable, right? That doesn't exist in the small bowel. You're not going to feel that. You're not going to feel those kinds of things. So it's tricky. So anyway, yeah, more restrictions, more symptoms, things kept getting worse. Okay, so then I get like a general physician at this point, because my DPT has done what she can. She's indicating there's some kind of something, right? I go to a GP and I'm like, hey, what, like a family doctor, and I'm like, what is this? What's going on? Tell them the story. All right, and all you guys are going to know what happens, right? He says, oh, you got IBS, and what you need is probiotics, and this joker gives me CBD cream too, which, by the way, that stuff actually kind of works for like local pain or whatever. I'm not against that, but in terms of like, okay, really, was it going to treat me, So IBS. Okay, IBS is a freaking mess, and the professionals in the field know it too. And if you get a good one, they'll tell you. They'll admit it. They know. It's what they call a trash can diagnosis. Okay, they just give up on people or whatever, or there's enough of them that sound similar enough. The first thing they're going to want to do is just diagnose you with IBS, even though you can't even really diagnose it, because there's not really an actual protocol where they can say, oh, this is the test and this proves this. Well, actually, I should caveat that there's now Dr. Mark Pimentel's antivinculin blood test to determine if you've developed an autoimmune disorder, essentially from this whole process, which that is kind of under the umbrella of this. So to be fair, there is actually that now, but for the most part, virtually nobody's even aware of that, doctor-wise or otherwise. And they're just going to say, oh, he sounds like, the same old thing, so let's just tell him he has IBS and food intolerance. Oh, and then they'll say, oh, and do the low FODMAP diet. That'll make you feel better. All right, so what happens then, right? All right, right off the bat, probiotics, freaking mess, all right? Because what's your problem? Your problem is that you have bacteria having a giant party in your small bowel. And so what do? You eat more bacteria? It's not even that they're good or bad, right? Because the whole thing is, oh, these are good ones. It doesn't matter, right? You have them living in a place where they're not supposed to be. So they're feasting, and all their off gas and all this stuff is screwing you up. They're stealing your food. They're harming your villi, right? So you're just throwing gasoline on the fire, taking these things. And especially the ones they give you, right? Because they give you some crazy nonsense where it's like, here's these like 30 different random strains with incredible billions of them, right? Yeah, it's a freaking mess. And then he goes, oh, and then do the low FODMAP, because they love that whole thing. So then okay, great, more food restrictions, right? So then by that point, I'm like, no gluten, no lactose, no red meat, all low FODMAP, which is a fairly restrictive diet. And I'm doing all this, and then, what happens is well, first of all, the probiotics made me feel real messed up real fast. And that made my doctor go, well, that's so strange. I don't understand that. Ridiculous. Okay, it's going to screw you up. It's going to screw up anybody if you take any of those crazy things with SIBO, with serious SIBO. The low FODMAP, though, it gives you the illusion of that it helps, right? Because you're reducing fermentable foods, right? Which are foods that bacteria love because they stick around and they can eat them, right? And not to mention also they produce their own amounts of gas, which doesn't help when you're already having all the swelling and stuff, right? So it makes it seem like they're helping. And it does reduce symptoms. The problem is they've proven that the low FODMAP diet creates nutritional deficiencies after 90 days, right? And what these doctors will do, if you're not careful, they'll just be like, yeah, just go low FODMAP. Have fun, have a nice life. So, who knows how that's going to end up for you, right? And how long you're going to be doing that to yourself. Either until you just get so fed up with it or you actually end up with serious problems. So it's not great. And specifically, I'll just mention here, Dr. Mark Pimentel literally made a different diet because of his concerns about the use of the low FODMAP diet. And it's called the low fermentation diet. And that is a better idea for SIBO people. He'll tell you, though, it's not to treat you. It's just if you really want to be more in control of modulating your symptoms. That's all it's going to do for you. But at least do that. Don't do low FODMAP. Not for any serious amount of time. Low fermentation diet, you can be on that as long as you want. It won't do anything to you. All right, so the GP, right? He goes, take this stuff. It's no real good, right? And I just keep kind of hanging on, doing what I'm doing. And then things get worse. Basically, it's what I'm talking about. Your quality of life just keeps shrinking. It's like you have to give up more and more and more just to be in the same place. You're not getting better. You're just holding as bad as you've always been while you do less and less things, and you slowly get more and more essentially sick. Until I end up with this crazy pain in my lower bowels, and I went in and was like, I think this is this is like almost like ER level of pain. I remember specifically on that day, I had eaten nothing but a potato the whole day because it's all I could take. And I felt like my lower intestine was going to explode. And I went in and I'm like, this is, it was an area they call the sigmoid colon specifically. And the very common disease there is diverticulitis. And so I think this is diverticulitis. I went to him, I said, it's got to be. The pain is crazy. It's right in the right spot. He goes, well, there's a whole thing here we got to do, but if you want to just do something fast because this feels like an emergency, you can take this medicine called Flagyl, this antibiotic, right? It's very good at diverticulitis, and I'll just give it to you right now. And you'll know if it works real quick. Great. So I take it. And it works real well, real fast. I felt so much relief so quickly. I actually thought, well, this is it then. I must have some kind of like damage way down there, and this is clearing it up, and hallelujah, right? Sadly, I keep taking this stuff, and after like 3-something days, I start getting super messed up, sick, weird stuff I've never felt before. Like, it was like I had a super flu. I had to be in the dark. I couldn't see the light. It was like I was turning into Gollum on this stuff. It was freaking crazy. And it turns out Flagell's got a reputation. It's a pretty nasty drug. And I started feeling like out of body. I remember looking at my arm and thinking like, I'm not sure if I could move my arm if I wanted to. I was like, I had to think an unnecessary amount to control my own body parts. At that point, my wife had enough. She called them and they said, all right, he needs to stop. So what happened? Looking back, all right, well, basically you got enough of a slowdown, right? SIBO, all this stuff. You start to get such an impairment that you start to just get everything blocked up and everything so inflamed. Everything it's just waste packed in everywhere. And you get so much inflammation. I had a GI later tell me, she's like, I'm pretty dang sure that you were essentially starting to feel the beginnings of maybe some superficial tearing because of how swollen up you were. And that was the pain that you were starting to feel a sense of urgency about. And why did Flagyl help? Well, Flagyl is actually used for SIBO, funny enough. It's kind of a backup. They don't really want to go down that route, but it's effective at wiping out bacteria. And so it was very good at taking away my symptoms very quickly. However, it also is very well known for causing something called die-off or Herx reaction, because it kills so much so fast that you essentially start to get some crazy superflu. And it's very likely that's what started happening. And without having that perspective or warning or thought of like this might happen going into this, it was like, this is scary and this needs to stop. But all this happened and no one could explain any of it. I tell my GP and he's like, none of that makes sense. I don't know. At this point, I'm like, all right, screw this guy. I'm getting a GI because it's a GI issue at this point. You know, I'm not going to use a general doctor anymore. So I get a GI. The GI's like, well, let's do a colonoscopy. Let's go in there and let's see what happened. I'm like, all right, we got to do it. So we have that whole fun thing. It's not that big of a deal, to be honest. The thing itself was fine. It's just the prep that sucks. Drinking that stuff is not fun. So they do the colonoscopy, and I remember thinking, man, I'm happy about this. I'm going to get answers because we know where it is now. And, of course, you go through it all, and you wake up, and you finally, you get back to normal, and they're like, well, congratulations, you were perfectly fine. And that's not the last time, right? It just keeps going. I can tell you, there's nothing more upsetting than being so sick for so long, and then finally thinking you have an answer, and they're like, "Oh, guess what? We found out it was nothing." You're like, "I hate you," It just thanks for nothing. So that was, that. They go, "Oh, you have a great colon. Everything's perfectly fine." So then I go back to life. Everything still sucks. Nothing's been solved. I've had all this stuff done. No one can explain why any of the medicine did anything. And the problems get back to being worse and worse again. I go back to the general physician at some point, and they just start this whole gaslighting procedure, which you guys probably know a lot about. It's their favorite, right? Anytime that they can't figure out what it is, it just goes straight to, how are you feeling? Are you, they send someone in with like a depression questionnaire, like they basically just don't believe you. It's like, if they can't do their job, they're not going to admit it. They're just going to start painting a picture that you're a freaking lunatic, right? Who just can't get better, won't get better, whatever. So the gaslighting starts. So, I restrain myself and I just move on, right? And this is years, I don't even know anymore what year we're on in this story. Okay, I can't piece it all back together, but as much as I can remember, this is what's going on. All right, so after this point, though, something starts that's the real problem, and I can say that this started about 2 years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago. Brain fog, but when I say brain fog, you're not going to understand unless you're one of the people who had exactly what I had, and I can tell you what it is. If you're a SIBO person and you are like, my life is over because of brain fog, welcome, because I am going to tell you exactly what you need to know, because I spent my whole life for years trying to answer that question, and I know exactly what it is and what to do about it. But basically what happens is, for a certain subset of SIBO people, we are unlucky enough that the bacteria that are going crazy in our small intestine create a byproduct called D-lactic acid. Not all of them do. Only some of them. Some of them make L-lactic acid, which, funny enough, is not even that big of a deal. Our muscles make it all the time. No biggie if it makes L-lactic. But if you're unlucky and it's D-lactic acid producing bacteria, you are in for a world of hurt. You end up with something called D-lactic acidosis, which is a nightmare. And not only is it a nightmare to experience, but it's a nightmare to get any help for, because it is essentially an insanely rare disease before the existence of this process, with the whole SIBO understanding thing. The only knowledge that all the hospitals and doctors have about D-lactic acidosis, up until they figured out in 2018 that SIBO can cause it, was an insanely rare complication of a surgery. Like, I'm talking like 2 and 4 million people would get this. And so it's one of those things where it's like the only resources they would have for it, it would be like some really rare thing where somebody would have to go to like a specific hospital in the whole country, like the only place that would even know what it was. But essentially what happens is your body's not supposed to have D-lactic acid in any real meaningful quantity outside of the large bowel. And the bacteria make it in the large bowel because, again, these are the bacteria. They're supposed to be there. They're supposed to be trapped down in there. But the stuff down in there is not supposed to be getting up into your bloodstream and in your body, right? So you're just excreting it. Your body's never having to deal with it. But when it's in your small intestine and your body's sucking it up, it's producing it in quantities vastly faster than your kidneys are capable of processing. And it's like a neurotoxin. It goes in your brain and it stops. It gets complicated, but it directly interferes with energy processes in the brain. So all this whole ATP stuff, that makes like your brain cells able to fire and communicate and do all this kind of basic like housekeeping stuff they need. It all requires basically like energy, right? This D-lactic acidosis goes in your brain and just starts shutting that down. So your brain cells essentially stop being able to fire. And what it does is it creates this crazy experience that is almost exactly like serious drunkenness. I'm talking just about shit-faced drunk. So if you could think of like when a time where you were not blackout, but you were real drunk, and then strip away anything remotely fun or entertaining. There's no fun about it at all. Just the cognitive impairment aspects of it, and the sloshiness, the slurriness, the lack of balance, all of that is there. You will have that happen to you every time you eat for about 3 hours, because that's how long it'll take your kidneys to catch up, by which time it's almost time to eat. So you're basically almost permanently completely drunk out of your mind. And you can find stories, sad stories of people whose lives are essentially just destroyed. And, can't work, they can't even drive. And now they've started figuring out what's happening. You can find some stories of doctors already making the point of, you need to write a note for these people just so if the cops pull them over, they don't send them to jail thinking they're drunk driving. Because that's what it feels like. So if you feel drunk as heck, that's what's going on. It's called D-lactic acidosis, and it's not a good situation. And when that started about 1.5, 2 years ago, that's when this took a serious turn. Because it's one thing to be like, man, I can't eat a bunch of food, and chronic pain real sucks, but I kind of had a handle on that after the physical therapy. But everything else you could kind of live with. Your life just sucked. But that was like, life's over. I mean, this is just a matter of time until your work figures out how sick you are, and then you can't function as a human in society anymore. It's over for you. And when that started, it was like, all right, this is different now. This is the only thing that matters. And every once in a while I see people in SIBO community and stuff, and they'll be talking about like, what is this brain fog? Like, I could care less about swelling and bloating and discomfort and some of this miscellaneous stuff, but like this is what matters. And I feel for those people. I always try to reach out to them because this is the serious stuff. The brain fog is horrendous. I had COVID twice. I had COVID brain fog. It doesn't even hold a candle to D-lactic acidosis. Okay. So once that started, it was like, all right, this is now my life mission because my life is over if I don't solve this. And to be honest, a lot of people out there, they've had this SIBO, IBS, gastritis. They've had a lot of these things. And the reason they're not getting solved is because you can, for the most part, you still live, okay? The only reason I had to solve this was because of this, okay? It was because of D-lactic acidosis. That's why I got to the absolute bottom at any cost, okay? So that started happening, and it was like, all right, this is getting serious. And soon after that started to develop, I got a crazy new sharp pain on my right, just under my ribs right here. And right after, I ended up going to ER. It was a pretty serious feeling. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, you must have gallstones. Very common, whatever. So they checked me for gallstones. I got these like mixed weird signals from the ultrasound people. It seems like some of them thought that they existed. Some of them were like, nah. So then I ended up going to a more like full hospital later, like the next day, and they were like, "Nah, I don't really see gallstones." And then, but I was like, "But this pain is like serious. Like I'm worried about this." And they start worrying about maybe the gallstones already moved on and they're trapped in some other duct. It can get kind of scary with the whole gallstone thing. So they're like, "Well, we need to do a HIDA scan." So then they start doing this HIDA scan stuff. Spend $1 bazillion, do this whole specialty HIDA scan, whatever. And guess what? It's all said and done. They go, congratulations, it's nothing. You don't have gallstones. Bye. Right? So, again, I control myself, and I'm like, this is crazy. I'm in serious pain, and after like 2 weeks of all just jerking me around, all they want to say is, you have nothing. So, I start looking and just looking literally at a picture of like a anatomy and being like, what else can even create pain there at that spot? And the only thing I could find is basically that duodenum, which is that connection between the stomach and the small intestine. And there's this whole thing called duodenitis or duodenitis, however the heck they call it, however they say it. And I write my GI and I say, I must have this. It's the only other thing I can think of. And she's like, well, great, let's do an endoscopy. And that's where they go and tube down your mouth in your stomach, the camera. I'm like, let's do it now, tomorrow. I want it, right? And so she was really helpful. She got me in immediately. So we do this endoscopy deal. So they go in there, they check out the stomach. Really annoying. It takes a long time because they take biopsies. They cut pieces of your stomach out and send them off to a lab. So you got to wait a couple weeks, still in pain, wondering what the hell is going on. So it turns out it was right. It was chronic duodenitis and also chronic gastritis. Okay, so what the heck is that? Well, essentially, the acid is not draining from my stomach. Not enough, not often enough, or whatever. It's spending too much time in there, right? Compared to what it should be doing. It's not flowing properly. Well, why? Well, because immediately downstream, I've got a freaking bomb, right? I'm just swollen up all the time. It's putting so much back pressure. It's pressuring on my bladder, it's pressuring on my low back, it's pressuring now on my stomach upwards, so my stomach can't even drain. So there's so much acid trapped in there that it's eating away my stomach lining, starting to form ulcers. Okay, great. So new disease, but at least we actually know what the heck it is, right? Okay. This whole gastritis thing is interesting. It's a tricky disease. It's a tough disease. There's a lot of people that got it. And you know what's really funny about gastritis is it has an extremely parallel story to SIBO. I haven't even seen anyone comment about this yet, really, in general. But it's why I think Dr. Mark Pimentel should seriously be considered for a Nobel Prize at some point in his life, especially if he considers or continues going on the path that he's going. Because basically the guy won the Nobel Prize for doing exactly what he did for the stomach. Because back in the day, they used to tell everybody that stomach ulcers were stress. They would just gaslight the hell out of everybody. They'd be like, all y'all just need to chill out. Just chill out. You're all just freaking out too much. And then they ended up, one doctor ended up figuring out, oh, all these people have a bacterial infection in their stomach. It's this bug called H. pylori. It's like 80% of them. They've got literally something is eating away their stomach, right? And here we are telling everyone to just calm down, and their insides are being eaten. So he finds this, he proves it, and the scientific community takes absolutely forever to do anything about it. They take, science is science, right? They got to prove it, they got to reprove it, they got to, do the whole duke it out to really, really make sure it is what it says it is. But the thing is, it took he waited 30-something years, and they were still not getting anywhere on even just recognizing this is the problem. And what was also really important is if you recognize that it's a problem, you can kill H. pylori. You can kill it and then move on, and your stomach will heal. And meanwhile, they're just sitting there, fighting. And so one day, he famously gets fed up with it and poisons himself with H. pylori. Just drinks a beaker of it to be like, look at what's going to happen to me because of this. And he ended up famously getting a Nobel Prize for this whole thing eventually. But it took the scientific community absolutely forever, right? And there's a very similar story going on right now with IBS and SIBO. Because for forever, IBS was like this whole, people need to just chill out. It's stress, it's anxiety, people are just do whatever, and everybody just chill out, and you'll be fine, and you can eat whatever you want. Well, now they've proven that somewhere between 70 to 80% of all IBS is SIBO. So you have bacteria in your small intestine that are destroying you, and that's what's still going on. Is they're saying, well, you just need to chill out and take probiotics. Great, thanks, right? So there's a huge revolution. And the thing is, this is just happening now. Dr. Mark Pimentel proved that sometime in the mid-2000s. And I think it was even 2015 when he got, he ended up pushing and proving through getting FDA approval for Xifaxan as one of the official tools, really the only official tool to eradicate the bacterial problem in the small intestine. So when you think about the ulcer story and the stomach story, it took those guys, you look at how long it took, and then you realize Dr. Pimentel is just now figuring this stuff out, right now, in these last few years. It gives you a perspective on, well, this is why we are where we are, right? This is why you're stuck here on YouTube listening to me instead of going to some doctor who can actually tell you what the heck is going on. So basically, I got this whole pre-ulcer thing now. I got gastritis, I got duodenitis, which basically is it just means acids eating away my duodenum and my stomach lining. So at that point, I'm like, well, let's do an H. pylori test because I figure out all that. Let's go make sure, because there's an 80% chance that I have H. pylori, and that's going to solve everything. And in fact, it kind of seems like this is a bacterial problem. So I must have this. This has got to make sense. I test twice, both negative. Man, that sucked. That sucked to get so close to feeling like you finally knew what the heck was going on, right? And to have such good odds that that was right. And nope, you don't have a bacterial problem. There's no H. pylori. So then they're like, well, you need to go on these H2 drugs and PPI drugs and these acid reducers. Well, guess what? Those things make SIBO worse. They know that. But nobody had SIBO on the radar yet. So I take those drugs. I will say they're quite effective at healing the chronic erosions that I had started because they weren't super mature yet. So I did get pain relief quickly. To their credit, they did work. But those PPIs are kind of a dramatic thing. You don't really want to be on them super long. What was interesting was the H2 actually kind of took the edge off my main thing, the only thing I truly, truly cared about, which was my insane acidosis brain fog problem. Brain fog. Those words don't even do credit to it. Or I'm just going to acidosis, okay? That's what it is. So it turns out that there's actually two parts to how SIBO can jack up your brain. The main one is acidosis, but it also causes, they call it histamine intolerance, which isn't even really a great word because it implies that you have some special reason that you can't handle histamine. It's not an intolerance. All it means is that you're having so much inflammation. It's like an allergic reaction. Your body's just producing lots of histamines in response to it. It's producing more than your body can process quickly and it's essentially like you're having an allergic reaction. And H2s are histamine blockers. So it kind of started taking the edge off of some of my brain stuff. And I started thinking, well, that's really nice. I mean, I don't know, but somehow it must be related. I don't get it. But anyway, that's why. It didn't solve it, but it helped a little bit. But it didn't do anything for the acidosis, and that was the real problem. So anyway, I'm looking at this. I'm taking these drugs, and the pain goes away, but they basically tell you to take these drugs for like an insanely long time. And I start basically getting involved in this whole gastritis community online. And right away, let me tell you, I've been through all kinds of doctors. I mean, you've heard enough of it right now to get the idea. The single most important resource I've ever had to ever finally get better was Reddit. Period. It sounds ridiculous, but it's a freaking fact. Reddit, if you get a diagnosis like, oh, we went in, we scoped you, and we know you have gastritis. Here's the image. Here's the proof. Here's the biopsies. Go, get on our gastritis. There's subreddits for every disease you can think of, and they're just full of hundreds or thousands of people constantly sharing their stories, and everyone kind of bouncing off each other. And if you observe it for long enough, you start to see the repeating stories and the repeating trends and some of the outlying things to be worried about, right? It's not like the end-all do-all, but man, you really, really do yourself a lot of favors by getting involved in the community for whatever. If you have a serious disease, you can learn a lot. And that's the only reason I ever actually ended up figuring anything out, because I started to get into our gastritis and just watch everything about it. I was determined to get rid of it. And one day, some guy did me the biggest favor of my life. And he went in there and he said, if you got gastritis, and you're like many, many people with gastritis, sadly, and you're never getting better, no matter what. You do the drugs, you don't get better. You're hardly able to eat any food. You can't eat acids. You get all these other dietary issues with gastritis because your stomach is falling apart. And he's like, if you're just losing it, you can't eat anything, and nothing's getting better for months and months, he's like, you got to check out SIBO. Because if you don't figure out what the root cause of your issue is, you're never going to get better. Because gastritis isn't even really a disease. It's actually a symptom of an underlying cause. So until you figure out what the underlying cause is, you're not going anywhere. You're just hovering in place. And they'd already said, well, it's not H. pylori, so, at that point I was like considered idiopathic, which just means we don't know what it is. And that just kind of retreats back to the whole, maybe you just have stressful or life or something like that. Well, no shit, I have a stressful life. I'm sick as hell all the time. But it still doesn't make sense, right? It's one thing, stress is one thing, right? But it's, it's a circle, right? Because how could you not be distressed, right, at a point of living like this? So anyway, they didn't really have an answer, and I didn't think the whole stress thing was very convincing, that's all they wanted to leave it with, was, well, you just need to chill out and your stomach will get better and just keep taking these pills. To me, the odds seemed pretty bad. So when that guy said that, hey, if you're going nowhere, you need to check this thing out. That's the first time I ever heard SIBO. Ever. And at first, I made a note and I thought, I should look that up, and then I didn't. And it wasn't until like some time went by, I was like, oh, I better look at that. And just right off the bat, it was like, whoa, wait a second. And everything started to click. And I thought, wait a second, how could I have these problems that are like unexplained in my large intestine to now I have problems in my stomach? What is it? I've just got problems everywhere. I got problems, it's just crazy. But I was like, and it's one thing for it to be like muscles in my legs and my groin, to hair, to brain, to, but when it went from large intestine to stomach, I was like, but that's a direct path. And there's something in the middle of that path, right? It could have went from one end to the other. And I'm looking at this SIBO thing, and I'm like, but that connects the dots. That would connect these things. And I keep looking at it, and I'm like, oh my God, this could be absolutely everything. So I asked my GI, I said, do you know about the SIBO thing? Because I'm getting pretty convinced by this. This looks very interesting. And she's like, yeah, it's a thing. We can order a test. You could have it. And I started telling her, I think that could have even been the whole flagell thing. I started looking back at my whole story and being like, well, that makes sense, and that makes sense, and that makes sense, and everything makes sense. So they order the test. All right. So first of all, you got to quit all the drugs and stuff to take the test. Be aware of that. So I did all that, and then you got to eat a special diet, which is, you've done that forever by now. Then you drink this stuff, which is basically a fake sugar. And the reason they give you that is because fake sugars don't get absorbed by your small intestine. They're non-digestible. That's why there's zero carb, right? That's why people think that, like, oh, I want to have this fake sugar because it's not like real sugar where, I absorb these calories. And, well, what ends up happening and then is you just feed all the bacteria because they can eat it. You can't, so you're not absorbing it through your small intestine walls, but they can. So they just have a feast. And so what happens is I take this stuff, I drink it, and within about 15 minutes, I was at a 10 out of 10. I was done. I mean, my brain, it was like I could have had a stroke. I was completely screwed. And the problem was I was home alone, and I was not sure I was capable of even breathing into the bags properly. So be aware of that. You got to take these breath samples after you drink this stuff. And I was so impaired after drinking it. I was like, oh my God. And I remember, it's kind of funny, but I was so obsessed with making sure I did everything perfectly. I had all these clocks out everywhere because it's like every 20 minutes you got to blow into the bag. And then I drink this stuff and I get basically shit-faced, right? Just out of my mind, can hardly stand up. And then it's like, okay, and then I realized that, like, the toaster oven's clock was actually off because it hadn't been adjusted properly for, like, daylight savings or something. And then like my phone was off from this other watch that I had, and all this stuff and I was like, oh my God, what was the actual 20 minutes? I'm sitting here trying to figure out which one's real, what's the real time. Oh my gosh. But I ended up getting it to be okay, and I did the 3 hours of blown into bags and whatever and send it off. But be aware that it's going to be rough. It's going to send all your symptoms through the roof because you're just giving those bacteria a feeding frenzy. But when that happened, it was funny because as insanely unpleasant as it was, you got to remember I was having that, or at least close enough to that, every time I ate, multiple times a day for years. And this was the first time it mattered. Because when it did that, and I went all the way to 10, I was like, then this is it. Because there's no other answer left. There's nothing, it has to be. So I was actually happy how horribly sick I was. Because I was like, there's no way this isn't going to be positive. Sure enough, I wait like a week or however long it was for them to analyze it. And it was a very positive result. I was a hydrogen positive case. There's different types of SIBO, depending on what type of bacteria has invaded your small intestine. There's basically 3 that they figured out now. The most common 2 are hydrogen and methane. So basically the bacteria they eat, and then that's the off gas that they're creating. It shows up in your breath. And then the third one that they've only recently started to understand is H2S, hydrogen sulfide. So those guys are now in the group, and the only test that they can do for those guys is called the Trio Smart test, and that's really the best test. You should be getting that test if you have SIBO or are concerned about it. The Trio Smart test is the one that can measure all 3 at once. So I was specifically hydrogen positive, and I had an increase specifically of about 50 parts per million in like 20 minutes. It was just off the charts. So that was cool because I finally had an actual answer. Here it was, SIBO. And so now I'm going, okay, so what the heck is SIBO? How do I find it, I'm super happy, super excited. Oh my God. But at the same time, okay, what do I do? And once I start looking into it, it's just like a abyss. You know, you hope that you find, oh, okay, well now I'm gonna get on the subreddit for SIBO, and you hope you're gonna just look and it's just a bunch of people like, yay, I just did the thing and now I'm better. And that's not what you find. But it's okay. I'm determined. It's been all these years, right? I gotta get better, whatever it is. But it's a maze. There's so much stuff going on. There's stuff about prebiotics and probiotics, and specifically, right, certain strains, and the kill phase, and the Xifaxan, and flagell, and neomycin, and then motility, kind of in the side, and all this. Oh man, biofilm disruptors. I mean, oh jeez, what a freaking mess, guys. Okay, so really, what's going on here? You got SIBO. You got to deal with it. You know what it is. Um, what's going on is right off the bat, your doctor's probably going to say, well, let's do Xifaxan. It's really the only thing that they've ever gotten official approval for. And even that is kind of a weird approval. They actually have to do some kind of shenanigans where they tell the insurance that it's IBS-D for them to give it to you. So it doesn't cost you like $2,500. Even though there's not even really real qualifications for what IBS-D is. So it's all kind of a joke that they all just kind of wink and nod about, even though they now actually understand this is what it is and what it's doing. But anyway, they're going to give you Xifaxan or Rifaximin, whatever they call it. And so I got that. I'll just say that. Right off the bat, I got my hands on some Xifaxan and started taking it. It worked, right? The whole point of it is that it's a pretty cool drug. It's an antibiotic that doesn't totally screw up your microbiome and your large intestine, which is usually the problem with antibiotics. They go in there and they just wipe out everything, and then you end up with this hard reset that can be tough on the body. Xifaxan is cool because it gets completely absorbed by the body before it gets to the large intestine. So you don't have any of those nasty side effects, which is really neat. Cool drug. Part of why it's so expensive. The thing is, it goes in the small intestine and does a pretty good job of killing things. Now, however, it doesn't do a good job for everyone. There's a reason, and they'll talk about it. You watch like Pimentel's lectures and stuff. They talk about this like RK bacteria stuff. The point is, it all depends on what bacteria is going on with you, right? There's a zillion different ones, and Xifaxan, in fact, no antibiotic was ever really made like specifically for some of the varieties that can be infesting your small intestine. So it's kind of just a crapshoot. You're taking this because you're trying to figure out, am I in the lucky group that this medicine even does anything and it kills the bacteria that I have? And it's pretty much a yes or no question. Some people take it and they're like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. This didn't do anything for me. It's like, well, it's because you have one of these specific RK bacteria varieties that this just simply doesn't work. It doesn't kill that. So I was fortunate. I had a hydrogen type that Xifaxan worked well for. So right off the bat, I started getting the first time I ever felt something actually directly attacking my symptoms specifically, in every sense of the word. I started feeling everything improve. And that was a wonderful, wonderful feeling. So it's good stuff. However, like I talked about in the beginning, it's all about motility. It's all about those migrating motor complex, all that scenario. You got to get things moving again. So can you take drugs or different other techniques to kill this stuff? Yes. And you probably will want to. You might even have to. However, Dr. Mark Pimentel makes a great point that you could cure SIBO without any kill phase, ever. And I feel sad sometimes seeing these people do really extreme things to kill bacteria. Because they might not have even had to do that if they just focus purely on fixing their motility. At least try before you do some of these extreme things. I would. It's something I think that should be advertised more. I mean, some of these things are pretty scary. I mean, these methane guys, they'll give them Xifaxan plus neomycin because they think that apparently that statistically that helps the likelihood that it's going to reduce the bacterial overgrowth subtype that they have. Well, neomycin's kind of a scary drug, man. It's got, you can permanently just get tinnitus forever. Just like, oh, whoops, sorry. You know, you just started to hear something and now you're never going to stop hearing it for the rest of your life. Whoops. I would rather try something else before risking that. That's just me. But they don't tell you that. You know, it's one thing if you're like at wit's end and you've tried everything and that's, you know, that's what's left. I get that. But I don't think a lot of people are making an informed choice about that. Their doctor's just going, oh yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. Here you go. And you might not have even needed a kill phase anyway. Point is, if you can restore motility again, you're good, because essentially you're going to, not only you're going to clear yourself out, but you're going to eventually continue to make your small bowel an uninhabitable place, as it should be. And any bacteria that are in there eventually are going to retreat to where they're supposed to be. At the end of the day, that's what you have to do. Anyway, so why do they even do this kill phase? Well, first of all, what do they do? They do the Xifaxan, or they'll do the Xifaxan plus neomycin. Some people, if they put up a fight about the neomycin, will do Xifaxan plus Flagyl, the thing that I was on. And then if none of that works, they'll do this elemental diet, which is essentially that they give you just like water with powder in it that has vitamins to keep you alive. Because essentially the only way that you're going to starve the bacteria is if you starve yourself. And because bacteria can eat carbohydrates or in sugars, which are just, you know, come from carbohydrates. And carbohydrates are in virtually all food. You know, it's only animal protein that doesn't have carbohydrates in it. So that's why you're never getting away from it. Even if you do diets and whatever, you're never completely escaping carbohydrates, right? So you're never curing anything with a diet. So they got to go to this extreme thing where they just give you this powder and water. And it's like weeks of that. And you just are basically starving to death. It's only because there's artificial nutrition in there that you're even, you know, okay. And you got to chug a lot of this powder water stuff while your insides are basically just going crazy. And, you know, because all the bacteria are dying or whatever. So they can do any one number of those things. Now, and do, you know, whatever you think works best for you. The elemental diet, the one thing that it has good for it is it's quite effective. I think it's somewhere around 80% effective, which is more effective than Xifaxan statistically. Why do they even do this? The reason why is because if you kill enough of the bacteria, they have found that it can restore a certain degree of motility. Your MMCs can actually start to come back. You know, how much exactly is that? Nobody knows. Nobody at this point can really give an answer to that, but they do know enough that, hey, you can actually restore some function. So if some people have a mild enough case, some people are fortunate enough, and they can just do the kill phase, and if it worked well enough and they had a mild enough case, they're not only is everything killed off, but they might have done enough to kickstart their motor function again. And that really solves the problem. Okay? So, you know, some people, that happens. Hey, that's awesome. But the numbers aren't great. Okay? I wouldn't plan on it. You should definitely be looking forward past that, because there's a whole lot of people out there, even that, first of all, they'll take it and feel nothing. But even if you take it and feel something, odds are pretty dang good that it's going to come back, even if you feel better. That's what happened to me. So I took Xifaxan, felt like, man, this is it. I wrote my GI. I was like, we did it. We figured it out, and we're killing it, and I'm finally, for the first time ever, actually feeling like I'm getting help. Then the pills stop after 2 weeks, and everything comes back in 2 days. So, now what? So then it's like, okay, well, screw everything. Screw the doctors. I'm going to get one of these, like, naturopaths who's, like, focuses on SIBO, because there's, like, a whole sub thing where some of these naturopaths have figured out that doctors basically aren't curing it, And they're like, well, we can get in there and we can do alternative approaches, because they've also figured out that there's certain herbals that do statistically, apparently, as well as even like Xifaxan at killing massive amounts of bacteria, like FC-Cidal, dysbiocide, candibactin, ARBR. Some of these things, they can be quite effective at killing bacteria. And once it became kind of like, well, herbals work just as good, it kind of, like, naturopaths kind of jumped on that. And then there's this whole thing of like, well, we focus on SIBO. You know, your doctor, all they're going to do is give you Xifaxan every 6 months. By the way, that's something you should be aware of going into this. I mean, Xifaxan, literally the manufacturer advertises on their commercial. You know, it can give you symptom relief for up to 6 months. That's literally what it says. So it's not a cure. They're not even expecting it to be a cure. So that's something just to be aware of. So you end up with this whole sub-industry of like, well, we're really going to solve it. You know, all these guys do is want to sell you pills. It's, you know, that kind of thing, which is true, but also not totally true. So anyway, I get this naturopath. I'm like, all right, well, I might as well explore your whole thing. So they give you all kinds of stuff. You start getting into biofilm disruptor. It's like, well, you can't really kill it all because, you know, you have this thing called a biofilm in your intestines, and the bacteria are going to basically retreat into that, and they can kind of hibernate and eat off of it. So you're never really going to be able to kill them. So you got to take these weird herbal combinations that destroy your biofilm, which, by the way, should be there for a reason. Dr. Mark Pimentel talks about that. He doesn't mess with those things. Your biofilm has a purpose, and you probably shouldn't be just wiping it out. Especially because at the end of the day, is it going to change anything? I mean, again, you can kill 99.9% of it. They still can come back. So, but they come up with all these different angles of like, well, we got to do this, and you got to take this good stuff, you know, these good probiotics that are specifically good for SIBO for certain reasons, as opposed to just taking like random probiotics or whatever. And you start talking about S. boulardii, which isn't a probiotic, it's actually a fungus, but it's good because it competes with resources with some of these bacteria. And then they get into the whole like L-glutamine, like we need to repair your intestinal lining and all this kind of stuff, which is going to happen anyway if you just, it'll heal on its own if you can just get rid of the infection, right? But anyway, so I started exploring some of this stuff. But around this time is when I found Dr. Mark Pimentel. And even though I had a whole shelf full of all these supplements and stuff, I hadn't started them yet. And once I found Dr. Pimentel, that was it. I would just, every second that I wasn't drunk, I would dedicate to listening to everything he had ever done. And everything he was saying makes sense. And basically, it was like, look, the message was clear. We got to restart your migrating motor complex. That's got to start working again, one way or another. So that's what I started looking at. Now, the problem is, even with Dr. Mark Pimentel, here's the problem you're going to run into. You can follow everything he says, and you're going to find out all roads lead you to prucalopride, basically. Because they used to do low-dose erythromycin, but basically, here's what it comes down to. And I got my own GI to just straight up admit this after she wasted my time with some Linzess. They don't have any tools to stimulate the small bowel, MMC, that were made for that purpose. They've never made a drug to stimulate the small bowel. They got all kinds of drugs to stimulate the stomach. They got drugs for the colon. But the whole 20 feet in the middle, they got nothing. They just got stuff that they made for other reasons, and then they're like, oh, it kind of works in the small bowel. And to be honest, some stuff I've seen, they don't even fully understand how small bowel MMCs even work fully. They don't fully understand the mechanisms of it. Much less have they made drugs for it, targeted to it. So what they end up with is like, well, we've got these things that we've used because they're the best that's the best that exists that we have pharmaceutically. So, and basically in the latest greatest is prucalopride. And he focuses on, I think it's a pretty significant piece of his arsenal. He does other things because he's an excellent doctor and he pays attention to the individual needs of individual patients. But essentially what you're going to find if you're determined to find, like, what's the magic pill if I had the best treatment in the world, it's prucalopride is what lies at the end of that right now. Now, here's the problem. It's not really approved for, nothing's really approved other than Xifaxan, which is only kind of tangentially approved for this disease. So if you tried to get it, first of all, good luck finding a doctor who even knows what it is, who even is willing to try to write you a script. And then even if you have that, good luck your insurance approving it, right? So that's the situation there pretty much. Some people get lucky and they get to play with it. Supposedly it works okay. However, it's not needed. There are easier, cheaper, simpler ways to get things flowing in the small bowel, and that's not getting enough attention. Specifically, they have a few different things that are just OTC type things, and they're really just blends of a couple things that have been noted over time to get the small bowel moving again. And funny enough, it's real simple. The most popular ingredients are ginger extract and artichoke extract. Those two things have been studied in a number of different ways for a number of different reasons, whether they call it functional dyspepsia or whatever brand name they want to put on it, IBS or whatever. They have shown that they get things moving. And I think ginger, if I remember correctly, more stimulates the stomach, and artichoke more stimulates the small bowel. But either way, especially for someone like me who had stomach slowdown, right? That's why I was getting acid issues there. It's great. It just gets everything moving. So you can just find these extracts, like, some of these grocery stores just got like weird random, like, oh, well, here's ginger extract, like that kind of stuff. You can just get them probably anywhere, which is also what's cool, because this is a global problem. And a lot of these places, their governments, their healthcare systems it's all over the map. And some of them, a lot of them, you can't even get Xifaxan in the whole country, right? So it's tricky, much less prucalopride, who knows? So, but you can get ginger and artichoke freaking anywhere, pretty much. So, and it costs like nothing. So you might as well go try it. I found a few studies where they were actually specifically studying a certain dosage and combo of ginger and artichoke put together into a singular pill called ProDigest is what they were calling it when they were researching it. It later got licensed off to orthomolecular labs as Motility Pro. So I ordered that. Wasn't even much money. And just that was it. I mean, that was it, guys, for me, okay? But also for a lot of others I see in the subreddit. It's become quite popular. It's not the only thing, but it's a leading one, right? They do pretty dang good at stimulating the small bowel. If you take this stuff, you're not going to wonder if it's working. You take it in the morning on an empty stomach so that it quickly gets through the stomach without wasting time in there and the acid eating it away. Because if you take it after food, it's going to sit in your stomach for a while, and then you're going to taste it because it's going to go off in your stomach. It's not going to get where it needs to go, right? Because it's going to sit there and the acid's going to eat away at it. So take it in the morning, empty stomach, and that way it'll get through to your small bowel, and you are going to feel it. You are going to have gurgle, 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 all this activity right in the dead center of your abdomen where you don't even remember what activity feels like because you hardly ever have any because you have SIBO. You're just going to get gurgle, 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 all these movements and, whatever. You're going to feel the muscles firing, and you're going to be like, holy crap, this works. And it's not even a prescription drug. It's freaking ginger and artichoke. Once I started taking that was it. Boom. Everything started getting better. everything. And it wasn't like Xifaxan where it's like, oh yeah, right away you just feel better, because it's like, well, I'm still all backed up and slowed down, but it's just like killing bacteria. It was like, no, everything's getting better, and it's staying better, and it had other benefits too. Like when I started taking that, I lost 35 pounds in a very short amount of time, just purely because of all the swelling, inflammation, sickness was leaving. My whole body just shrunk. That didn't happen on Xifaxan because I still had the problem. I had just basically poured a neutralizer on the problem, but the problem was still there. So everything started getting better. There's other things. There's another popular one called SIBO MMC. I've heard that one's even stronger. It's a different combination of things that are, I think ginger's in there too, but it's other things that apparently are known to trigger, specifically MMCs for SIBO. And it's just OTC. You can just get it online. And so point is, guys, you got to get the small bowel moving again. And the reason why doctors aren't really helping a lot of people is because even if they know what this is, which a lot of them don't, a lot of these doctors, they're trained to think by the book. Like, I can only give you things that have been proven in double-blind placebo studies of, 10,000 people for 30 years that prove that, if I give you this, then this happens, right? If they are that kind of doctor, you're going nowhere because they don't have that, right? If you really need prescription-level intervention, it's going to have to come from a certain very involved group, and they're going to have to make some very serious debates to your insurance company too to even try to do some of these things. I'm pretty sure Dr. Mark Pimentel has to put a lot of energy into dealing with insurance companies for the sake of his patients. I mean, look, this is going to be my little rant I'll let myself have about doctors. I've had doctors literally ask me to call my insurance company to find out what they're allowed to prescribe me. Who's the doctor? Right? They are. Right? This is the problem. Doctors don't work for us. We all think they do, but they don't. They work for the insurance company standing over our shoulder. Right? That's who's paying the bill. They know who's paying the bill. It's not us. It's them. So as much as you think that you're there and they're working for you, they're winking and smiling and shaking hands over your shoulder with the guy who's actually done a little contract with them on the side that says, hey, if you want to be in the cool kids group and you want some of this money, you're going to follow my rules. And my rules say you're going to say this, and you're going to follow this flow chart, and you're not deviating from this, or you're out. So good luck, right? They literally talk about this at SIBO conferences you can watch. One of the most popular questions is, what the heck, as patients, are we supposed to do? Because there's like 10 doctors in the country who are even seriously versed in this and willing to put up the fight that it takes, right? Everybody else is a pawn of the machine and probably doesn't even know what SIBO is. They're still just saying, oh, you have IBS, here's probiotics, right? And even some of the ones who do aren't really going to do anything for you, right? Because they know who pays the bills, and they're not really going to put up a fight. Heck, they hardly even do their job. They're not seriously being doctors. All they're really doing is following the pre-prescribed flow chart of, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to test, and this is what you're going to tell them. So that's why it's really important with such few tools at our disposal to be more aware of our OTC options here, especially when they are incredibly effective. It sounds ridiculous that a disease so heinous could be fixed after tens of thousands of dollars, dozens of doctors, and all these, almost a decade of work, all this stuff, and it's like, oh, you just need a ginger and artichoke. It seems impossible. but it works. And, look, everybody's different. Everybody's got different levels of impairment. How impaired is your small bowel? I don't know. Everybody's different. How severe is your infestation? What species has infested you? Maybe you need higher doses, but the point is, what you need is to find something that gets your small bowel contracting and doing its pulsating motion. That's it. That's how you're going to get better, period. And if you just focus your work on your time and your effort and your search on that and looking at some of the most popular tools for that, and stop obsessing about what's the best kill phase and what's this special new biofilm disruptor and I'm going to do this glutamine healing, whatever. Stop it. We need to be focused on, let's get the stuff moving again. Because if it moves, everything takes care of itself. Your body wants to heal itself. Okay? Once you get out all the junk and you get things moving again, and it's going to help you. There's a certain amount of feedback where once you've cleared it out, it's going to start working again. Even some of its own capabilities are going to start returning. So just focus on getting things moving, okay? Ginger and artichoke did it for me. There's other things like SIBO, MMC to try out there, but there's probably even more stuff out there. I messed around with Trifolo for a little bit. That didn't do it all for me, but it worked a little bit. There's probably a lot of stuff that's worth investigating, okay? A note. You probably are going to need a little help on your large intestine. Probably because things have been so slow, your body's probably slowed down as a whole. You maybe even have some harm down there. For me, what really helps me, see, if I literally do nothing but ginger and artichoke, I end up with a traffic jam at the bottom of my gut because all this works so well and so constantly that it pushes everything down and it just gets stuck because my large intestine isn't primed to keep up. And I found... the thing is, there's lots of tools for large intestine, including prescription tools. You probably don't want to go that way if you don't have to. So why don't you go ahead and try some natural things first? Literally, I'm one of these people where caffeine is extremely good at stimulating the colon. And there's a lot of people like that. You hear people talk about drinking coffee and having to go to the bathroom. I don't like coffee in the mornings. I don't like the oiliness and the fattiness and all this stuff. So I do black tea. Black tea in the morning. It's like a miracle pill. Just bang, everything's gonna clear out. So literally, ginger, artichoke, and black tea every morning. That's it. Done. Everything gone. Okay, let me look back here at my notes and see some things that I missed. Oh, this is an important one. Stress. Okay, let's talk about this. This is a big issue because, yes, are we all getting gaslighted? Yes, we definitely are, by a lot of doctors, okay? However, there's a seed of truth here. The seed of truth is stress is extremely well known to impair motility. It slows down the gut. Stress does. So there is a certain feedback going on here if your body's under stress, and it doesn't have to be mental. I mean, certain mental stress, it's physical stress. It's all stress on your body, right? If your hair is falling out and your teeth are grinding, something's going on, okay? Muscles are spasming and whatever else. So stress impairs motility. So you need to spend a certain degree of effort on stress reduction. You need to get serious about it. Treat it like it's part of your cure, because it is. It makes a significant impact. And I had to kind of go full circle on that because of, having experienced doctors so full of it, acting like, oh, you need to just chill out. It was, not fun to be like, oh, well, there's some truth to that. But at the end of the day, you got to spend some time on things that are going to stress your body and make sure that those are being reduced, okay? And some of it's stuff you don't even think about, like screens, looking at screens, the whole blue light thing. I mean, they know the stuff, it stimulates a certain amount of anxiety, right? And so things like that you need to be aware of. Are you having a long commute? Are you, as much as you can, try to reduce these things, because anything that impairs motility, that's your problem. That's your enemy. To that point on dieting, there's only one thing that I pay attention to on diet. Like I said, everything I'm good. However, I don't eat just garbage, fat, like some super fried grease junk. Why? Because fat is the single food that impairs motility the longest. It slows down your body. It slows down your stomach, takes the longest time to empty. Everything just takes longer if you eat fat, large amounts of fat. So be careful with fat. It's not about like don't eat fat or go on an anti-fat diet, but you need to be thoughtful about that, because it's like, do I need to be on some special thing? No, I can eat it, but I'm always paying attention to my motility. I'm always making sure my body is flowing really well, top to bottom. And if I'm going to eat some big greasy pile of whatever, it's not doing me any favors. So that's all I pay attention to moving forward, as far as diet goes. Something to think about. So reduce stress. Spend some real time looking for any low-hanging fruit to get rid of it, to improve that. And watch fats. Watch really, really fatty things. Let me see. What else did I miss? POTS. I forgot to mention POTS. Yeah, at some point in there, I started to get POTS, and that stuff is scary as hell. Be really careful about that. Dr. Mark Pimentel has literally said that he has had patients, he's lost patients to POTS. It's scary, scary stuff. Your heart forgets how to function properly, and it's not good. So I was in a position where I'd be at work, and if I ever stood up, I would have to lean on something, or I would fall over, because my heart rate would go through the roof. And what happened there, well, the reason I got POTS is because I had been restricting way too much, to be honest. I think part of it was probably malnutrition and like the villi were being damaged and stuff like that. But POTS was because I was evolving this procedure of, oh, I can't have that, and I can't have that, and I can't have that, because I've attached all these bad experiences to all these things. And you just keep retreating, like I said, into a smaller and smaller cone of how you can live, right? And what happens eventually is your body is getting sick over and over and over, horribly ill, and you're not getting nutrition, and your body starts to freak the heck out. And it can be so messed up that it starts to forget subconscious capabilities, like how to manage your heart rate. And that's serious shit. When that started happening, that was the first time I ever felt like something was more dangerous than my brain, my acidosis. And I actually reached a point where I was at a table with food I would have never eaten, including a whole basket of French fries. And I felt this overwhelming feeling of, you need to eat that right now. You need to eat that. And I did. And I felt insanely better quickly. And I thought, oh my God, what is going on? I mean, I'm starving to death, to the point where my body's starting to fail. And so I just started eating everything for a little bit, and the POTS went away pretty quickly within a couple weeks. I just said, you know what, screw the brain fog, screw everything. I'm just going to endure it, but I can't do whatever the heck this is. So be careful out there. Be careful. POTS is some serious stuff. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Feel free to write me like a note or something if you want to send a private message, you got questions. But overall, focus on motility, guys. That's what's going on here. Oh, I was going to say, look, I meant to say this in the beginning of the video, but I forgot. When this all started, and actually over years, I thought, one day I'm going to find out what this is, and it's going to be some weird, rare disease, right? I'm going to be like 1 in a million and whatever. It blew my mind that it ended up being something I was like, oh, wait a second. 20% of the world has IBS, and 70-something, 80% of them, it's SIBO. We're probably talking about 1 billion people that need to know this. And they're all being told to just calm down and have probiotics. So this is important. This is seriously, seriously important stuff. So that's why I want to get it out there. I'm paying it back for me ever being able to get better, and it's not like I'm looking for a needle in a haystack. There's a lot of people. I already met someone at my work whose daughter was chronically ill for over 10 years, and after my story, he had her tested, and it was methane dominant SIBO. So there's people all over with this. And some of them, it's just like more of a convenience issue. It's like, oh, I have IBS and, I feel bloaty or whatever. Hey, I get it. People shouldn't live with that either, right? It's not always a life-threatening thing. But the thing is, this is all over the place. And it's just inexcusable, okay? Because it's simple. It's the small intestine. It's the spot we're all not paying attention to. And it's an insanely critical part of the body where we get literally all of our nutrition. And there's no attention being paid to it. And when you start looking at what it is, what it does, and why this could be happening, it's just like it's logical. It's simple. It's like, look, this could be happening just all over the place, and all it really means is we need to be improving our motility. We need to be actually getting a little more exercise is good too, right? That's stress reducing, and it helps motility, right? All these things are important, right? And that's the answer, okay? Getting things flowing. So, yeah, there's a lot of people out there that need this, and I hope it helps some. Yeah, this ended up being a completely stupid, ridiculous long video. I don't know who knows if anybody will even watch it, but I'll put it out there. And like I say, feel free to send me a note or something, but I think I said just about everything I could think of. So, good luck, guys.